Johnny Carson's Hidden Truth, the 7 guests he banned forever. There's something about Johnny Carson you didn't know. He was more than the beloved host of late-night TV, or the person who made The Tonight Show a famous American program for 30 years. Hidden behind his success was a private list he never talked about in public. Before his death, he shared the names of 7 guests he strongly disliked, people he used his influence to ban from television completely. Some were famous Hollywood stars. One was even his close friend. When you learn the first name, you'll see why Carson kept so much darkness hidden. Number 1. Wayne Newton, the confrontation that made Carson angry. Of all the guests Johnny Carson didn't like, Wayne Newton caused the biggest problem. His story comes first for a clear reason. He did something nobody else had the courage to do. He confronted Johnny Carson directly at NBC Studios, prepared for a fight. For many years, Carson made jokes about Newton during his opening monologues, jokes about how young he looked, his Las Vegas image, and hints about his personal life. During the late 1970s and early 1980s, these kinds of suggestions could destroy an entertainer's reputation. Newton stayed quiet until Carson went too far on live national TV. The jokes suddenly became very personal, suggestive, and harmful. Newton didn't make a phone call. He didn't send his manager. He went there himself. He got past security because he was famous, walked straight to Carson's office, and stared down the most powerful person in late-night television. Newton moved closer and spoke in a calm but serious voice. "You can make fun of my singing, you can make fun of my hair, but if you ever make jokes about my sexuality again, I'll beat you up." For Johnny, this was unacceptable. Carson stood up slowly, using his tall height to show power, and replied in a cold, flat voice, "Leave my office before I have security remove you." The moment Newton walked out, the ban started immediately and lasted forever. Carson told his staff to never book him on the show again. Newton had done the worst thing possible. He threatened the host in his own building. The results were serious. Without The Tonight Show, Newton's nationwide fame decreased. His Las Vegas shows continued, but his mainstream success never fully came back. Even today, their conflict was never resolved. Newton said later, "I would do it again," showing the bad feelings never went away on either side.
Number 2. Joan Rivers, the betrayal Johnny Carson never forgave. With Joan Rivers, there was no confusion and no second chance. The instant Johnny Carson saw her name in the entertainment news announcing she was starting a competing late-night show without telling him, their relationship ended. Right away, completely, forever. This wasn't just another guest misbehaving. Joan was the only person Carson had publicly supported, privately coached, and personally trusted in a ruthless business. He gave her the guest host role, stood up for her talent when executives doubted her, and publicly told America, "You'll be seeing a lot of her." And people did see her because Johnny made it happen. That's why the betrayal felt so devastating. When Fox offered Rivers her own show in 1986, she felt scared. She knew NBC was secretly planning to replace Carson eventually, and she had learned she wasn't being considered. At almost 50 years old, she worried about becoming too old for the industry. She accepted the deal while knowing she still hadn't told Carson. Then, Fox released the story to the press. Carson saw it before she could call him. Johnny became completely silent, then said quietly, "She didn't even call me." It was the most personal hurt he had ever shown at work. Then he ordered her name deleted from the show's records, old video clips removed. Guest host told not to mention her. Staff instructed to reject her phone calls. The words he used were final. "She's dead to me." For Carson, the problem wasn't the competition, it was about loyalty. Joan Rivers' silence felt like being abandoned, exactly like he experienced as a child with distant parents. The old wound reopened and turned into anger. They never spoke again for the rest of Johnny's life. Her career fell apart, her marriage ended, and she publicly said years later, Losing Johnny felt like losing my father. But for Carson, the story finished the moment she didn't pick up the phone.
Number 3. Charles Grodin, the guest who embarrassed Carson on his own show. What kind of guest looks Johnny Carson in the eyes and questions whether he even cares about his own program? The answer is Charles Grodin, the only guest who turned Carson's smile into something cold and angry right in front of millions of people watching. From when Grodin sat down, Carson felt something was wrong. Grodin wasn't there to be entertaining. He was there to challenge, provoke, and reveal things. His whole act was built on confrontational humor. But this time, he didn't just test limits. He crossed them and damaged Carson's pride. Grodin started carefully, rolling his eyes, interrupting questions, acting bothered. Then things got worse. He accused Johnny of not reading his book, of asking lazy questions, of not trying hard during interviews. At first, Carson went along with it, thinking it was part of the performance. But Grodin's tone changed. His insults got sharper. And suddenly, the joke didn't seem funny anymore. The final moment came during their last appearance together. With a slight smirk, Grodin leaned forward and asked, "Do you really care about any of your guests, or is this just a job for money?" The audience laughed uncomfortably. Carson didn't laugh. His smile stopped. Johnny had spent decades hiding his emotional coldness, his fear of closeness, his reputation for being friendly on camera but distant in person. Grodin had exposed the truth in one embarrassing sentence. During the commercial, Carson didn't shout. He didn't argue. He simply turned to his producer and said quietly, "We're finished with him." And that was the end. Grodin was never brought back. No explanation, no conversation, just silence. For Carson, this wasn't about comedy. It was about respect. Respect for the host, respect for the program, respect for the image he had built over a lifetime. Grodin crossed that boundary and then tried to pretend it was just a joke. The band continued for the rest of Carson's career. Grodin later said, "Maybe I pushed too hard." But by that time, the relationship was already completely destroyed.
Number 4. Shelley Winters, the night she threw a drink at Carson. Some moments in television history happen so quickly and violently that everyone in the studio becomes still. Shelley Winters created one of those moments, the type that Johnny Carson never forgot, never forgave, and never let happen again. The trouble began the second she entered the stage. She wasn't stable. She wasn't alert. She wasn't the respected actress audiences loved. She was upset, unpredictable, and obviously drunk. Carson noticed right away, but he tried to guide the conversation carefully, hoping to help her get through the segment without problems. He didn't get the opportunity. As Johnny tried making a light, harmless joke, her face transformed. The smile disappeared. Her look became hard. And before the audience could understand what was happening, Shelley grabbed her full glass of whiskey and threw it directly at Johnny Carson's face. The room became silent. Viewers gasped. Carson sat there, wet, shocked, humiliated on his own stage. It was one of the few times in his 30 years on television where Johnny lost the calm, steady manner he was famous for. The second the cameras switched to commercial, Carson got up, dripping wet and angry, and walked away without speaking. Shelley Winters was removed from the building before the break finished. When Johnny came back, he had changed his clothes and made the show continue. But his mind was already made up. He told his staff in a voice that allowed no argument, never book her again. It was the public disrespect, the breaking of the unspoken rule that you treat the host, the stage, and the show with professionalism. Shelley destroyed that rule in front of millions. She never came on The Tonight Show again, and Johnny never changed his mind. To him, the drink wasn't just liquid. It was an attack on his dignity and the reputation he created over many years. The band stayed until the day he stopped working and beyond.
Number 5. Truman Capote, the drunk appearance that ended his Tonight Show career. Truman Capote didn't end up on Johnny Carson's band list because of a fight or disagreement. He got there in one terrible moment,
by appearing on The Tonight Show so drunk that Johnny understood for the first time a guest could actually ruin his entire show right in front of millions of viewers. Capote's entrance already revealed everything. He wobbled slightly, his eyes looked unfocused, his voice shook before he even sat down. The audience laughed politely at first, thinking it was part of his unusual personality. Johnny didn't laugh. He knew the difference between eccentric and losing control, and this was definitely the latter. The interview fell apart almost right away. Capote slurred his words, wandered into strange, incomplete thoughts, then went into comments so inappropriate that network executives almost panicked. Johnny tried everything. He made questions shorter, changed topics, even tried to make the mess seem funny. Nothing helped. The breaking point happened when Capote started telling a wandering, explicit story about a Hollywood party, something completely impossible to broadcast and far from what he and Carson had planned backstage. Johnny didn't wait. He went to commercial early, something he almost never did unless a real emergency required it. During the break, Carson leaned close, looked Capote straight in the eyes, and said, quietly but firmly, "Truman, you're not okay tonight." It was disappointment. When the show came back, Johnny ended the segment in less than 4 minutes, making it one of the shortest guest visits in Tonight Show history. Capote was taken out, and staff were told with no debate and no discussion, he's not returning. Carson wasn't judging Capote's personal problems. He had his own struggles and understood them. But appearing confused on national television was, to Johnny, breaking the audience's trust. It made him look careless. It made the show look unprofessional. And it put him in a situation where he couldn't protect the program he had devoted his life to building. Capote never came on The Tonight Show again. His career suffered later, with book promotions losing the biggest platform in America. Carson never reviewed the decision, never reconsidered, never softened. The ban stayed absolute.
Number 6. Bob Hope, the comedy legend who challenged Carson's authority. Bob Hope was supposed to be untouchable. He was American royalty, an entertainment icon who had performed for troops and presidents. But Johnny Carson learned something important. No matter how famous someone is, disrespecting the host on his own show means consequences. The problem started when Hope appeared as a guest but refused to follow the normal format. He arrived with his own writers, his own jokes, and his own agenda. He didn't want to have a conversation. He wanted to perform a routine, one that hadn't been approved or reviewed. Carson felt uncomfortable immediately, but he tried to work with it, thinking Hope deserved some flexibility given his legendary status. That courtesy didn't last long. As the interview progressed, Hope began ignoring Johnny's questions completely. He would wait for Carson to finish talking, then launch into a prepared joke that had nothing to do with what was asked. Worse, he started making comments that suggested Carson's questions were boring or beneath him. The audience laughed nervously, unsure if this was planned or actually hostile. Carson knew exactly what it was. The final insult came when Hope interrupted Johnny mid-sentence to deliver a punchline, then turned to the audience as if Carson wasn't even there. It was a power move, a way of showing everyone that Bob Hope didn't need Johnny Carson, the show needed him. During the commercial break, Carson didn't raise his voice. He simply told his producer with absolute certainty, "That's the last time." When the show returned, Johnny wrapped up the segment quickly and professionally, but the damage was done. Hope had treated him like a rookie, like someone who should be grateful just to share the stage with him. Carson instructed his team clearly, Bob Hope doesn't come back. It wasn't about jealousy or ego. It was about the basic principle that had guided Carson's entire career. The Tonight Show had one host, and that hierarchy couldn't be challenged. Hope never appeared again during Carson's remaining years. Some people thought it was just scheduling conflicts. Those close to Johnny knew the truth. The ban was real, It was intentional, and it was permanent. For Carson, respect wasn't negotiable, even from legends.
Number 7. Frank Sinatra, the icon who crossed the line. Behind the scenes, Frank Sinatra's band from The Tonight Show had nothing to do with what viewers saw on camera. Everything looked perfect during his appearances. The smooth conversation, the laughter, the charm. But what happened backstage told a completely different story. One that made Johnny Carson decide that no amount of star power was worth the chaos Sinatra brought with him. The trouble started with Sinatra's demands. Before he would even agree to appear, his team sent a list of requirements that read more like a dictator's orders than a guest's requests. Special dressing room, specific brand of alcohol, certain staff members removed from the building, particular camera angles. Carson had dealt with difficult celebrities before, but Sinatra's list felt less like preferences and more like commands. Johnny agreed to most of it, thinking it would smooth things over. It didn't. When Sinatra arrived, he treated Carson's staff with open contempt. He snapped at makeup artists, dismissed producers, and spoke to coordinators like they were servants. Carson heard about it, but stayed professional, hoping the actual interview would go well enough to make the backstage nightmare worthwhile. Then came the moment that sealed Sinatra's fate. During a commercial break, Sinatra leaned over and made a comment to Johnny, something about how Carson should be grateful for his presence, how the ratings would spike because of him, how Johnny owed him a favor now. It was said with a smile, but the message underneath was clear. Frank Sinatra saw himself as bigger than the show, bigger than the host, bigger than anyone else in that building. Carson's face didn't change, but inside, the decision was already made. When the show ended, Johnny called his producer into his office and spoke with complete calm. Sinatra doesn't come back. Ever. His staff looked shocked. This was Frank Sinatra, one of the biggest names in entertainment history. Carson didn't care. He had built The Tonight Show on a simple idea. Nobody was bigger than the program itself. Not Frank Sinatra, not anyone. The band stayed in place for the rest of Carson's career. Sinatra never knew why his invitations stopped coming. Johnny never explained, never justified, never discussed it publicly. To him, the reason was obvious. You can be the greatest entertainer in the world, but if you treat people badly and think you're above everyone else, you don't deserve the platform. That was Johnny Carson's line, and Frank Sinatra crossed it.
The truth behind Carson's iron rule. These 7 names reveal something deeper about Johnny Carson that most people never understood. Behind the friendly smile and the easy charm was a man who valued respect above everything else. He didn't ban these guests because he was cruel or petty. He banned them because they violated the basic principles he believed made great television possible: professionalism, mutual respect, and honoring the trust of millions of viewers who invited him into their homes every night. Each man tells us something different. Wayne Newton showed that physical threats would never be tolerated. Joan Rivers proved that personal betrayal cut deeper than any professional rivalry. Charles Grodin demonstrated that public humiliation had permanent consequences. Shelley Winters learned that professionalism wasn't optional. Truman Capote discovered that protecting the audience came first. Bob Hope found out that legends weren't above the rules. And Frank Sinatra realized that treating people badly backstage mattered just as much as what happened on camera. Johnny Carson built an empire on simple rules, and he never bent them for anyone. That's what made him the king of late-night television for 3 decades. And that's why his decisions, however harsh they seemed, earned him the respect of an entire industry. So now you know the truth about Johnny Carson's band list: 7 guests who crossed lines they could never uncross. But here's what I want to know from you. Which guest do you think crossed the worst line? Was it Wayne Newton's physical threat? Joan Rivers' betrayal of trust? Charles Grodin's public humiliation? Or maybe Frank Sinatra's backstage arrogance? Drop your answer in the comments right now. I read every single one, and I want to hear your take on this. And here's another question. Do you think Carson was right to ban these people for life, or did he go too far? If you found this story as fascinating as I did, then you need to hit that subscribe button immediately. We're diving deep into untold Hollywood secrets every single week. The stories the industry tried to bury, the feuds that shaped entertainment history, and the truth that never made it to the official biographies. Click subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and don't miss a single episode. Trust me, the next story is even more shocking than this one. See you in the next video.